Well, what can I say, guys? I'm really pleased to actually introduce Phil Riley to you because for me, this is very exciting times for Super A. Phil Riley, he's a creator of Boom Radio, and Boom Radio is targeting basically the same audience that we're targeting. Phil, I'm going to hand it over to you and just tell me a little bit about your background and how you came about with doing what you're doing right now.
So I'm a radio veteran. I'm 62. I've been in the radio business all my working life, from when I left university way back in 1980. I was involved with BR&B Radio in Birmingham, which people in the Midlands will have heard of. I was a presenter on that station. I went and got myself an MBA in New York at Columbia Business School, thinking I was going to leave radio, and then I got sucked back in. I ended up launching a whole bunch of stations in the early 90s, including in 1994. I was the guy that launched Heart, originally in the West Midlands and then a year later in London. And obviously now it's the nationwide, it's the biggest commercial brand in radio. I was responsible for it for its first 13 years before I sold the business that it was part of. I built Chrysalis Radio into one of the major players in the UK radio industry during the 90s and the 2000s before we sold that business in 2007. I then, with a bunch of colleagues, got some private equity backing to go and buy another business back in the Midlands, including BRMB, the station that I launched, that launched my career. And we bought those businesses in 2009, ran them until 2015 when we sold them. And then since then, I've been doing consulting work, non-exec board work, and I was sort of heading for a early retirement, but that was a bit frustrating for me.
Yeah.
And then an old colleague of mine who I'd worked with for 15, 20 years, we've known each other for longer than that. He was with me through Chrysalis. He was with me through Orion Media, the Midlands operation. He emailed me out of the blue just over a year ago and said, do you think there's a station for us baby boomers? Do you think Radio 2's moved too young and that it's created this gap and there's no commercial station in that gap? And I said, you might have an argument there. And I went away and I do a spreadsheet, and I said, what's the revenue likely to be? What are the costs going to be? How might it work? And we got back together and I said, yeah, I think this could work. Let's do it. And my friend of mine, David, is the creative genius behind it. It's his programming idea. He's the guy that is driving the program.
So why am I talking to you?
Well, because I'm the boss. I'm the guy who runs the numbers and is in control of the money. But between us, we're partners, and we've set the business. We've set the business up as a partnership between the two of us. Between us, we own half the company. We've got a bunch of friends and colleagues who are investors. It's we say on the air, it's a bunch of old mates who've got a dream, and that really is what it is. There's about 15, 20 of us are investors. They're all people that we know or have known for 20 odd years in the radio business. We're doing this literally from our back bedrooms, from our offices, from under the stairs.
This is what technology allows people to do, Phil.
It's incredible, Wayne. As somebody who's been in the radio business for 40 years and for whom 20 years ago, if I'd have launched, if I take the launch of Heart, the first time we launched it in the Midlands, we probably spent £250,000 on building studios and premises and all the rest of it. Incredible amount of money. We've spent nothing. Virtually nothing on this. Everybody, all of our presenters are doing it from home. There's a central hub where all the sort of wires go in. That somebody else's company that we just use, that we piggyback on. David's based out of his house in Nottingham. I'm based out of my house in Leamington Spa. I run all the finance side of it here. He runs all the programming side. I do the marketing. He does the music scheduling and everything. And we're doing something completely new, and yet we've been in this business for so long, and it's fantastic to be able to do it. And we didn't need to get a license from anybody. We just went out off our own bat, found some digital capacity, put the station online, put it on digital radio, and here we are 6, 7, 8 months in. We've just got our first audience figures. We've got 250,000 listeners already. The listening is going up every day. We get our numbers, we see our streaming numbers, and the listings going up every day. And it's, it's fantastic. It's just a great thing to have done at any point in one's life, but to do it in our 60s,
yeah,
with a bunch of people who are, some of the guys are older than us. Most of the presenters are in their late 60s or early 70s. And to be doing it with a bunch of people our age is fantastic. And many of the presenters, and they're well-known names: David Hamilton, Nicky Horn, Graham Dean, Roger Day, David Jensen. These are big names who've had a great career in radio. And many of them felt as though their time had come and gone, and that their day in the limelight, they'd had it, and that had gone for them. And they were all thrilled, I think, when David
you got
arrived.
a lot of, when I did some research, I noticed that you got a hell of a lot of publicity. It might have been goodwill, editorial publicity.
Yeah,
you did really well.
Yeah, and that's because I think it's a compelling story. It's a compelling story both because we're targeting a demographic that is currently massively underserved by the radio industry. We're doing it in a way which people are giving us fantastic feedback for, and we're doing it with a bunch of people who are known and loved by the audience, and who had been sort of put out to pasture by the other radio stations. And we picked the phone up to them and said, "Do you fancy having another go?" And they all went, "Yeah, too right." So here we are.
They're not ready to put on the comfy slippers and just sit back.
Not yet. Not yet.
Because that's what I found really interesting about what it was. We were introduced by a mutual friend, and
yeah,
I did my research, obviously, before I contacted you. And I just said, wow, this is where Super A is. And the idea of doing a collaboration with you guys, for me and for my business partner, Josh, it was just a no-brainer, because we have so much to offer. It's not about people saying, you can't stop the aging process, but what you can do during the aging process is be the best you can be.
Yeah, yeah.
And
absolutely.
We have a message in the same way as your presenters have a message to people. We have a message to a younger audience. We made the mistakes. We know what it takes to actually stay fit and healthy. And for the people who are our own age group, we can actually give them advice to actually start to slow their own aging process and actually make themselves feel a lot better.
Yeah, well, we had a philosophy when we started. We were trying to come up with a phrase to encapsulate what we were about, and the phrase that it's our internal phrase, if you like, and it's still busy living. And that's the motto, if you like, of the station. It's right, we're still busy living. There were a bunch of us, we're in our 60s, but we're still busy, and we're still living, and we're still trying to do something and contribute and add value to the world by running this radio station.
Indeed.
And actually, I do a show on the station on a Sunday night where I literally interview famous baby boomers, who are still living interesting lives, and it's called Still Busy Living. So that's part of the motto of the station, lives on the air.
Now tell me, how did you actually get into fitness yourself?
Well, I was very unfit. Well, so as a kid, I wasn't really particularly sporty. I played basketball. I'm 6'5", so I'm very tall. So I played basketball at school, did okay, but not brilliantly. I went to Loughborough, which is a very sporty university, but I wasn't into sport. I did computer studies. And, during my 20s, I was like a lot of people. I ran a little bit, I swam a little bit, but I smoked and I drank, and, I did all the things that people in their 20s do. And then as I got a bit older and moved on up in the business world and got married and started to have kids, I really stopped looking after myself. And during my late 20s and 30s, all the way through my 30s, I didn't do any exercise at all. I put on a lot of weight. I was eating out most nights, business dinners, business lunches, looking after the kids when they were young, full-time job and all of that. And I got to the point around about 2000, 2001, where I suddenly realized, crikey, I'm 40. And actually, I'm just completely unfit and massively overweight. And I needed to do something about it. So it was around that turn of, when you get to 40, it's one of those staging posts in your life, isn't it? You go, do I need to change my life a bit? And I did. And so I started to get fit in my 40s, and I've
It's perfect, because as Super A, the publication, Super A, the website, we actually saw that as the sign. That is the signpost. It's people in their 40s, 45. That's the turning point, or it's a dramatic health experience.
Yeah. And I was lucky in that I was significantly overweight. I think you've seen some pictures of me, which are embarrassingly are on the internet, where I was clearly carrying way too much. In fact,
and you were partying hard as well, I might add.
Well, yeah, I'm partying hard, but I'm in the media, in the radio business. You go out a lot. You have nights out with the staff, and you make sure you party. Most people party, but I was at my peak. I was 20 stone, and I remember a particular event where I was in a hotel and I was walking down a long corridor to get to the lift, and I could see a really, really fat person walking towards me from the other end of the corridor. And, I remember thinking, cool, he's a fat bloke, isn't he? And I realized as I got closer to the end of the corridor that it was a mirror, and it was me. And I just hadn't twigged that it was me.
Damn.
And that really sticks in my mind, to say, okay, I really need to get myself sorted out here. And so I began,
was this more from, sorry, Phil, was this more from vanity or from a health perspective?
Just a health perspective, I think. I'd stopped smoking when I was 33, when my first child was born. I stopped smoking in the run up to that. I'd smoked on and off in my 20s. I'd stopped when I was 24, 25, and then I went to the States. I started smoking things that you're not allowed legally to smoke. And then I came back and I started smoking cigars. And so, and I stopped all of that when I was 33. So I knew I knew I needed to be healthier, and I'd stopped, but getting rid of the excess weight was the big thing that I knew I needed to do. And so that was. And
how would you do? So now, obviously, you have a routine. You might go walking. I don't know. What is your routine?
It's a 3-level thing, really. I walk every day. We walk every day. We've got a dog, so we've got to walk. Dogs, I think, are a great thing. People that have dogs are healthier than people that don't, and there are all sorts of reasons put forward, psychological, whatever. And I think actually, it's just the fact that if you've got a dog, you've got to get out and walk the damn thing every day. So that's a good thing to do. So we walk every day, a couple of miles, maybe 3 miles, 4 miles at the weekends. If we go on holiday, it will almost inevitably involve walking at some point.
Yes, of course.
So we're very keen on walking. And my wife and I do that together. I think that's good for your relationship. So that's a base level of what you do every day. Then I lift weights twice a week. I've got a trainer. We do it on Zoom now. I bought some weights when lockdown happened. I bought some weights from home. So I don't do the heavier stuff that I was doing in a gym environment. It's lighter stuff, but I'm still doing it. And I might do a half-hour session with my personal trainer on a Monday. Then on a Thursday, I might do a 20-minute reprise, similar stuff, but just go through it, just quickly. And then on Saturdays, I'll do a 10-minute HIIT session. So 3 times a week, I'm doing something which is putting my body under stress and strain, and that keeps me well. So that's level 2, and then level 3, just to finish that off, is we're lucky enough to own a holiday villa in Mallorca, and we're there 10-12 weeks a year. And when I'm out there, I'm on my bike every day, every other day, and I'm climbing up the side of mountains and racing around the island, and that's heaven for me. So.
Do you encourage other people to exercise, or is it just something that's personal?
I do encourage other people to exercise, and it mainly falls on deaf ears, I think. And I really do bang on about resistance training with people our age, because I say to them, look, all the evidence is that as you get to your late 50s and into your 60s, your muscle mass and your bone density deteriorates 1%, 2% every year, unless you do something about it, unless you put your body under stress and work to to build strength in your muscles and your bones, you will just deteriorate. And that's why you do see people in their 70s, who are hunched over, they're shorter than they should be, they're more prone to illness or breaks or injuries because they've not looked after themselves. And you can start doing this at any time, can't you?
You can. And do you see something like a health show, like once a week for a half an hour working on a radio station?
I don't see a half hour working. I don't think people's attention span is that great. I think what we probably envisage, and this is something that I'm sure we'll talk to you guys about in due course if we progress, is shorter nuggets. I think it's this
bite size.
It's 60 seconds, 90 seconds. Here's something you can do to change your life, do something differently, and just a little nugget. That's, people take those things in and they can be spread into the programming very easily. So
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I think it probably that's more how I would envisage doing it. We've already done some stuff with other people. We did something with Muir Gray, the anti-aging doctor, about things that you can do to keep fit. He's probably more aimed at people in their 70s, I think, who are probably at the far end of it. But everything helps. Everything is good. We should encourage people to be fit and healthy.
Listen, I couldn't agree with you more. And that whole idea of these bite-sized pieces of information, to me, the idea of people sitting down and listening to people talking about health and fitness, it's not going to go in, it's going to come in here and then go out there. But if they're given a message, short and sharp, and here's a segment that's delivering a message.
Yeah. Here we're talking now, this is a deep dive into what you do and what I do. And for some people, this is great. But for most people who are listening to the radio, they've got one ear listening to the radio, but they're trying to do the housework or they're going about their daily business, they're not going to have the attention span to do that. So actually being able to give them little nuggets of information that they might just pick up and think, oh, that's interesting, I'll do that. That's how, I think you have to package the information according to the medium that's delivering it.
And this will help Josh and myself, my partner, as I said to you. Do you think that advertisers are going to sit up and listen now and actually realize that they're actually missing a trick with an older demographic?
Well, I hope so. That was the biggest risk that we felt launching the business, was that advertisers in general either don't feel that older audiences are worth targeting, or think that they can get away with paying a very, very cheap price to get to those older audiences. Now, that happens to be true. There are some media like daytime television that have a very large proportion of viewers who are elderly, and therefore getting to an older audience is very easy. So there is a downward pressure on prices to get to older listeners, whereas it's very, very expensive to get to younger listeners and viewers because they're all over the place. They're very hard to pin down. So that was one risk. And the fact that advertisers, many of them just think, well, there's no point targeting older people. They're already set in their ways. They won't buy our product. Now, we're doing a lot of work ourselves to disprove that. And obviously we're talking to advertisers and potential advertisers all the time and saying to them, actually, this demographic, they're as digitally switched on as the younger people. They're as active as younger people, many of them. They're spending money like it's going out of fashion.
This is very, very, very true. All you have to do is look what happened during lockdown. The older audience were forced to actually get involved with the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a sea change. There was some research that just came out this week, was done by an American company on digital listening to all sorts of things like audio and Spotify and podcasting and radio and everything. And the main thing that I took away from looking at that research was the digital penetration amongst 55 pluses was as high as it was in under 55s, within a point or two. There was hardly any difference between them. So I'm sure had you done that survey 3 years ago, there would have been a much bigger gap. The fact is that the lockdown has forced older people to get to grips with being
Technology.
online. Technology, and it's great for us. I mean, half of the listening to Boom is online. People are listening on smart speakers or on their mobile phones or on their desktops. Half of it's to DAB, and that's great, but that's easy for people, right? If you've got a DAB radio, you just press the button and scroll. To find us online, you've got to be a bit more savvy, and people are doing that. So we're confident that we've got a digitally enabled audience, and that's worth something to advertisers.
Well, there was a time for me when I first started teaching online that only a handful of people could get to grips with setting up their camera. Now it's second nature.
Yeah.
There is no problem for people to actually say, yep, hang on a moment, I'll just get my laptop out, and away they go. Whereas before, maybe I'd say only 3 or 4 years ago, Phil, they would struggle. They'd say, no, I just don't want to do it online.
Yeah.
They still need the human interaction, but they now do a lot of Zoom training, which is a good thing. But this is technology. This is how technology has shifted people. This is what happened during COVID. It shifted people to actually, re-strategize. And what we're finding now is we did an event that involved the 2 biggest gyms in the UK, which was David Lloyd and Nuffield. It was called Hood Fitness. It was all to do, it tied in with National Fitness Day that takes place on September the 22nd. And the interest from the gyms to actually want to get the older audiences involved was spectacular. They actually said, yeah, we need that audience. We want to target that audience.
Yeah, and I think there's something about, I haven't been inside a gym now for 18 months because of lockdown or what have you, but I was a regular gym goer before that. And I always inwardly was really impressed when I saw older people, overweight people go to a gym, because I thought actually it takes some guts to turn up at a gym and put your blooming lycra on when you're obviously not fit, and you're obviously overweight, and you go in there and you've got the super guys in the corner pumping weights, and they're all looking fantastic, and you're looking shabby, and you're carrying a bit of excess weight. And I always thought, good on you for getting in there, and I think and good on older people for getting in there. But older people would definitely still, I think, feel a bit out of place going into some gyms, because the
100%.
And that's a challenge for the David Lloyds of this world. And they've got to think about ways of saying, maybe it's, hey, 10 till 12, you're going to be 50 to come in, right? If you're under 50, you can't come in. It's an old folks only time. So I don't know what they're going to do, but you've got to find some way of incentivizing older people to feel that it's okay for them to
go. I'll actually nip you in the bud there. I think that what David Lloyd and Nuffield are attempting to do now, which is very good. I don't agree with actually having an OAP hour. that would just, I wouldn't want to be associated with that personally.
Yeah.
But what they are doing, they're actually pushing the boat out to get older trainers.
Yeah.
So when you look across the gym floor, you're going to see trainers in their 50s and the 60s.
And that's definitely what you need.
And so what you have as a person, if you were, as you described them, overweight, if they felt old and they didn't look so good. But when they walked into that gym and they're seeing trainers in their 50s and their 60s who are an inspiration to them, that is their benchmark. I think that's the way to do it. I think that what they're attempting to do in many respects is shifting that dynamic to telling people this is the old person section, but actually integrating everyone there, that you'll look across that gym floor and you'll see someone in their 50s or 60s wearing the branded shirt.
Yeah. It's a challenge though, isn't it? I think if you've not been into a gym for your entire life, the prospect of going in and being confronted with weights and barbells and dumbbells and machines, and that can be very daunting for people. And I think that's the biggest hurdle that we've all got to get across when we talk to people about this, is you've got to get across that fear of, well, I don't want to lift weights, I don't want to be muscle bound, I don't want to be. You've just got to get people to understand it is really important that they do it, because otherwise they're putting their health at risk.
And this is what we're actually doing on the publication and through the website. you'll see there's going to be a shift next year where we've got a number of older trainers that are enabling people to do the exercises at home. So it's always going to be convenient to them. But the most important thing is they're going to be seeing people that look like them, not as unhealthy as them, a fitter version of themselves.
Yeah.
But it's not a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old that's saying do this, and not in a month of Sundays could they bend down and do whatever or reach up. There are exercises. I see trainers in a gym with the kettlebells, and I'm thinking, you're really going to give, are you actually looking at that person you're training? And I just know that's an injury waiting to happen.
Yeah, yeah.
I haven't been, I'm a member of a David Lloyd, but I actually haven't been in 8 years there. I've never been to the weight section.
Yeah.
All of my training is in the pool. All of my training, when I'm at the gym, as I said, it's in the pool. I do my exercises in the pool. And then I have a program that I created myself called Jump Guts on a mini rebounder. And it's going down a storm. So people don't actually have to go to a gym. And what we're actually trying to educate people is your lifestyle, changing the way you eat, just changing things, the way you walk, the way you stand, the way you actually move your body. These are the things that we actually are saying to people, because some exercises that you see, my sons go to the gym and they're in their 30s and they're pretty strong lads.
Yeah.
And I know that if I walked into a gym and I wasn't fit, I would feel really intimidated by them and their football team.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've got, so that's the balancing act, isn't it? What you want really more than anything else is to move up the amount of exercise that people do from where they are now to doing more. And ultimately, I bang on about it with people and say, you really need to be doing some resistance work, even if it's only band work, whatever. But some of the people I'm talking to don't even go for a walk in a day. Well,
I know.
Let's start with the basics. Let's just get you out walking around the block first.
So tell me, I saw when I did my research on Phil Riley, The Life of Riley, your book. You had 5 key things that you were talking about.
Yeah.
What are your top 3?
Yeah. So the book was about living longer. It was the things that we could do to live a longer, healthier life. Because a number of my friends had passed away in their 50s. And I just think it was a complete shock to me. And I thought, crikey, why are these guys dying so young? And there were 5 things. The top 3 for me are being a normal weight, so not being overweight or obese. So you have to work a bit at that. You have to eat properly and eat healthily to do that. Second is to exercise, and the third is to practice probably intermittent fasting. I think there's definitely a lot of evidence that we run our bodies too hot. We are constantly feeding ourselves. We're constantly in A mode, and we need to have our bodies in B mode from time to time, which is, we need to, you need to take your body, it's like
to a deficit.
Yeah, you need to take it to the car repair shop every so often for it to repair itself. And when you're constantly feeding it, it's never, you're never giving it the chance to go, okay, I need to just repair myself. I need to clean out all the gunk that's in there. And all the evidence is that intermittent fasting, giving yourself a break between eating, is something that does that. I'm just, it's now coming up to lunchtime. I haven't eaten since, about 8:30 last night, so I'm starting to get a bit hungry. So I might go and have a bit of food in a minute.
You and me both. I stop eating at 7 o'clock and I start again at 12 o'clock.
Yeah, I mean, I in the book, I actually said, I talked about a 12-hour pattern, which was have breakfast, don't have lunch, have dinner. Actually, since then, I've changed my own habits. And if I was rewriting the book, I'd change that to say, skip breakfast. Breakfast has been invented by, cereal manufacturers.
Of course, it's overrated.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, sometimes it's great, but you don't need to have it every day, right? Sometimes there's nothing better than a nice full English breakfast, but not that often. Certainly not every day. So I haven't eaten today, so I'm, and it's coming up to lunchtime, so I'm looking forward to this. So intermittent fasting, doing regular exercise as much as you can and trying to build it up over time, and maintaining a healthy weight. You don't need to be stick thin. In fact, there's some evidence, I know it sounds a bit sort of peculiar, but there's some evidence that carrying a little bit of fat is actually quite healthy for you, because as you get older, you are more prone to shocks to the system, illnesses, injuries, all the stuff that happens to you when you get older. And there's some evidence that if you are really thin, you're not carrying a lot of body fat, if something bad happens to your body and therefore it's not really taking in sustenance and food, if you haven't got any fat on you, you're going to struggle for your body to cope. So there's an argument that having a little bit of excess is good for you. Not too much though. I think that's the thing. If you can get your BMI to below 25, so it's in the normal range, 22, 23 is a good thing to do. So
we don't actually go by that here at Super
I
A.
don't either. I have to say,
we go by the string test. We take a piece of string, and you
wrap it around your waist.
You put that piece of string in half, and make sure you can get it around your waist. Yeah,
absolutely. That BMI for me is the least worst of all the options, but it's got some real failings, and one in particular is it doesn't do very well for tall people.
Not at all.
So it really is bad for me. So if you can, I think I recommend it in the book. If you can afford it, not everybody can, but if you can afford it, buy a pair of scales with a fat percentage measurement, because that gives you a much better key metric on whether you're going up or down in terms of your excess fat.
So to round this interview off, I'd like Phil to tell me, what advice would you give your younger self if you were to go back in time? What advice, and you're in your 20s, what advice would you give your mid-20s Phil Riley?
Well, I would still recommend to the mid-20s Phil Riley to go to business school, get an MBA, because that was the best thing I ever did. But I'd tell him not to go back on the smokes, and to learn earlier. The one thing we haven't talked about really is food. I think I would have got him earlier to understand the importance of eating real food and not eating junk and crap, because I spent a lot of my 30s eating junk and crap.
But who didn't, Phil, for goodness sake? I mean, I used to quaff, McDonald's, pizzas, you name it.
I just wish I hadn't done quite so much of it, because that was a contributing factor to me getting to 20 stone. There's no, the thing about, if you want to lose weight, exercise is 10% of the challenge. Eating the right food is 90% of the challenge. So, you can exercise all you want, but if you can't outrun a bad diet, you can't. So you've got to get your diet right. And I think that's the one thing that I didn't get right for a long time. And now I would think much more carefully about what I eat and how I eat.
Well, you're looking well now, Phil.
Well, I eat well. I eat real food, simply cooked, is I think is the answer. So
okay, so Phil Riley, Mr. Super A. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time, and let's get this discussion going with Super A on Boom Radio.
Let's continue talking, Wayne. It's been great to talk to you.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.